parent church, Holy Spirit Lutheran Church in the Juanita neighborhood. And so we've been on this 6-month #adulting journey, as we've called it, as we figure out how to become this a legal nonprofit in the Washington state, all the things. And so you guys have been so great about tolerating some very adult conversations as we've had to talk through who we are, what we believe, and what I appreciate about these conversations that we're very transparent then about who we are too. So right now is another adulting moment for us as we talk about, that's right, you made it in time for the draft of the budget Sunday. Yeah, so, but again, I'm grateful that we get to do this because it is a way to be transparent about who we are and including our finances. So we're moving it to right now so that kind of we can enter into worship and just like close out the rest of our service the way that we want to. So this is a sneak peek of the budget for fiscal year 19 starting July 1st, and we will be voting on this at our congregational meeting here June 10th in a short meeting after our worship that day. So this will probably be about 15 minutes, so brace yourself. You ready? Okay. In which, again, we just want to be as transparent as possible. So 2 things that we'll be voting on: approving the budget for the next fiscal year, as well as approving my compensation package, which is just, again, a piece of how we function as an adult church, is that the congregation votes on that together. So if you were here April 29th, then you know that this congregation, we voted on a lot of things, including calling me as the pastor. Thanks, guys. But the other piece of that is approving my compensation package. Again, that's just how we legally function together and publicly function together in that. So that will complete kind of that call for me to be the pastor here officially. So again, welcome guests. Glad you're here. Lucky you. So to walk us quickly through this, I welcome to the stage our newly appointed church council treasurer, Greg Fenich. Greg, come on up.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, unfortunately, Sarah took all the fun out of the talk. So I get to talk about the numbers. Just to ground everyone, it's up there on the screen, but from a fiscal year perspective, we will be ending our current fiscal year, end of next month, so June 30th, and we'll be starting our new fiscal year July 1st. And so what I'll be showing you is 2 sets of numbers, how we think or believe we will finish this fiscal year. So that includes 10 months of actuals, and then May and June. When we do send out the next update, we will have May actuals in there. And so we will be hopefully getting closer to looking at how well we did on forecasting how we're going to finish out the fiscal year. So if you could turn, I don't have a clicker, unfortunately. So this portion reflects the income, and we have it in 4 different buckets. And again, the left hand, the FY18 column, you can see from an operating income perspective, we're looking at just under $340,000. And then for FY19, we'd be a little over $400,000. And the way this breaks down, the top line is the giving. So that's any of the online giving, the Joy Jar, et cetera, that comes from the congregation. We also have money that's coming in, which is classified under outreach. And so this would be any funds that come in from Thyvrant, as well as any matching. So if you're having matching through your employer, it would be showing up through there. These you can kind of think as more restricted, and so they would be going towards outreach that we do on behalf of Salt House in the community. From rent, as you know, we share this building, and we also get proceeds from renting it out. One of the things that I learned, and I think Kim did as well, that in order for us to keep our property tax exemption, we can only charge rent up to a certain amount, meaning we can't make profit on this. And so what you're seeing is a slight increase because as we look at some additional expenses, we are able to charge some additional rent. And then the last rent adjacent to the building here is what we have as a parsonage, and we rent that out, and with looking at next year, there will be a slight increase in rent. And so overall, you'll see from an operating income, we're looking at about a 19% year-over-year increase. And again, that depends on how we finish out FY18, but I think we would be in the ballpark. You can see at the very bottom, we are growing, and so with that, that allows us to see the increase in our giving from folks like you that come every Sunday. So any questions on this? As I said, we will be sending this out with a link to the details before the June 10th vote, but wanted to give you an early kind of view of what we're looking at. Okay, next slide. So as Sarah mentioned, we called her to be our pastor April 29th. Part of that is also having a compensation package that we present to her and vote on as well. And so we broke it down into kind of the large elements: salary, housing, FICA, medical, and reimbursed expenses. And you can, I don't know if you can read it, but we also looked at the Synod guidelines for a pastor with her experience as well as in this area of the Northwest. And so you can see down below, it's overall about an 8% increase, which is in line with the Synod guidelines. Any questions? Well, yes, and that's why, from a housing perspective, she would not be taxed on that. Yeah.
It just has to be less than the actual
Expenses.
expenses that they spend on housing.
Yeah. Good question.
So I get to designate that and then the rest is,
Any other questions? Next slide, please. So here are the categories of expenses. We just showed you the details for the pastor at the top. We have staff, benevolence, building, office, loan payment, and mission and ministry. For staff, you're seeing an increase there driven by a couple of things. One, looking at a COLA increase for the current members, as well as we are looking at hiring some more part-time support for some of the areas. And so all up, that does take us a little bit over from what we're spending this year. From benevolence, think of this, correct me if I'm wrong, as our tithe, if you will, back to the Synod. And so you'll see a slight decrease from last year, or this current fiscal year, FY18, and that's because the $35,000 that you see for FY18 includes an amount that we committed to, but it has not been paid, and so think of it as kind of catching up. And then building and grounds, we do see an increase year over year because we are budgeting for a new HVAC system, so that's about $6,000. Office, as we start a new church, we have some incremental expenses as we get set up, and that also includes insurance, et cetera. You'll see that this year we did have a loan on this building, but we paid it off, and so next year we will not have that expense. Yeah. 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 We made that decision to pay off the loan on that. And last, mission and ministry. I think this is important. We are budgeting more because we have the ability to do that, but also when we think about the different Thrive teams we have, et cetera, and what we want to do, we want to make sure that we're equipping the individuals or the groups to do more. And so I'm excited about that, and I hope you are as well. So down below, especially for the children. So our total expenses are going up just under 5%, which is not bad when considering how much we're growing the income. Always want to be in a situation where our expenses are not growing faster than the income. Next slide, please. So here's the all-up summary. When you look at our income and expenses for this fiscal year, we're looking at about $35,000 net income, and again, that has some assumptions going into May and June. When you look at last year's May, it was a large month for us when it comes to giving. We don't know what that's going to be when we finish, so that may come down a little bit. It may fall into June, we don't know. But for the FY19 numbers, you'll see that we're expecting about $85,000 in net income. Next slide. So when you bring this to kind of where we stand as the reserve that we would be ending the fiscal year with, you'll see FY18, Sarah mentioned we had the sale of the property. That's about $300,000 that would go to our reserve balance. That becomes our beginning balance for FY19. And then as I showed on the last slide, the net income of just under $85,000 would take us around $475,000 as our ending reserve balance. And so that gives us a lot of opportunity as a church to look at ways that we can be growing our ministry. And, she also mentioned what's going on with the building. I think there's a lot of opportunity for all of us to do some great things. So I think that's the last slide. Any questions? As I mentioned,
The first comment is that the net, you saw the $299, just want to be very clear about the sale of the property. We sold it for $600,000. You might have heard that number before, and you look at that and you say, well, what happened to $300,000? That is the payoff of the mortgage. So in case you're curious about where that number came from. The other thing is that if you look at this looks a little bit like we're trying to actually build more of an asset in terms of cash reserve. But as Greg said so beautifully, this is really intended to make sure that we're being conservative in our early years in terms of growth, because we don't know what's going to happen in terms of giving. We don't have a long history. Many churches, they establish budgets based upon multiple years of history. We don't have that, so we're trying to be conservative both on the giving side and also what we spend. So that's why that number looks like it goes up. I'm not sure that it'll go up, but the good news about this is that this gives us a basis to know and have confidence that we're in a good position over the next 5 to 10 years, which is really what the goal was for the sale. So.
Just want to say one thing. So just for perspective, we've been around for 3 years. 2 years ago, we were losing $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Like, we were living off the money that was gifted to us by Trinity. And to look at these numbers, it is just amazing what God has done in this place and the generosity. Again, we're living into a story of generosity. What Trinity gave, what we continue to give, and I'm so grateful for that as we continue to figure out how to live generously together. So can we just stop and go, oh my God! It's just it's awesome. So thank you. All right, okay.
Okay, part 2. So we're going to talk more about money, but I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in terms of our homelessness ministry. By the way, if you have any interest at the end of this conversation in sort of knowing more about it and being more actively engaged, we actually are having a Homelessness Thrive team meeting after our meal today. So come and join us, grab some food, and come and sit down with Heather. Where are you, Heather? She's there. Anyway, so Heather and I will be sort of hosting that discussion afterwards today. So there's 2 things that are happening with the homelessness ministry. The first one, as Sarah already mentioned, is that vibrant activity that's happening downstairs, and that continues to be going on. We're not going to talk a lot about that today because tomorrow night, as Sarah also mentioned, we'll be doing a full update about what's going on at the day center. But just sort of net about that, it's going beautifully. We've served, right now we're serving an average of 35 to 40 people. Last summer, those numbers went up to 60 to 65 every day, which is interesting to know that it actually happens during the summer as well. So anyway, that's something that we learned because that was our first summer. So we expect we'll probably have bigger numbers this summer as well. All kinds of opportunities to get involved if you want to be involved in the day center, so be aware of that. The second project, and that's sort of the bigger project, the longer term project, is the permanent shelter that the property we just mentioned that we sold for the $600,000 is actually the northwest corner of our property here, which sort of is catty-cornered that way. Eastside Cares is a campaign that has been launched to provide the private part of the funding associated with that project. So that project has 2 major components to it, and that is the shelter that is currently running as an emergency shelter by Catholic Community Services. CCS runs a shelter that is hosted in multiple places. Basically, it has to move every couple of months because churches host it, and they just basically in a gym or a multi-purpose space. People come in at night, have a place to sleep, but there's often there's a meal that evening, but there's no other real facilities in terms of showering or laundry. It's literally just a place to stay. So this shelter is intended to provide a permanent place with showers, with laundry, with day center opportunities, with services provided, health services, case management services, employment support, educational support, all of those things are part of what this is going to be. So the mission of the team, the New Bethlehem team, and now this Eastside Cares team, which combines both Catholic Community Services and the Sophia Way. The Sophia Way has actually been doing services to homeless adult women on the east side, and those two organizations are aligning and combining in order to do this bigger building project. So the mission of this is to create the 24/7 year-round shelter for both of those, to have a permanent place for people to go and have some stability in the midst of their transition, because homelessness is nothing but a significant transition in someone's life. And in most cases, it's actually temporary, and so we just want to help people through that moment of transition. Mm-hmm. The building, the entire project, is going to run about $9 million. So that's a number that you can see is broken down here and where the money's coming from. I find this really interesting because a significant part of it, you can see roughly $7 million of it is public funding. Mm-hmm. So feel good about your legislators, feel good about the people that you have voted to represent you, mm-hmm. who are saying yes to fixing some of these issues that are happening in our area. And so you can see these numbers are pretty big. King County hasn't yet come forward with their $2 million. We've requested that, but that's partially because the levy that happened, you remember you might have voted for the levy, for the Health and Human Services levy and Veterans levy that last year. That changed their cycle. And so anyway, it looks very likely that they're going to come forward with that, but the decision's not until July. So that's why that number is there. The State Housing Trust Fund, we got the $2 million a few months ago, confirmation about that. Again, thank you for voting a Democrat in on the east side, because actually that seat flipped the legislature and allowed this money to become available. So be aware, it matters when you vote. You have whatever opinion you have, make sure you're voting for that. East side cities have already committed, or we anticipate a little bit over $200,000 for that. City of Kirkland, over $1 million. State legislatures, this is from the prior piece of the budget, was actually $350,000. And then you can see the $2 million anticipated. Thing to be really excited about, this campaign's been going on for a little bit over 3 months, and we have $1.1 million of that $2 million already secured. And that's people like yourselves who are being engaged. So today, what we wanted to do is tell you that this campaign is going on. If you feel moved to be involved with that, there are actually, I'm not sure if you got them when you came in, but there's actually a Eastside Cares, there's an envelope, there's a sort of a campaign information where you can actually go to do that. You can see Eastside Cares if you want to give online. This allows us to support both the Sophia Way component, which is the $1 million on their side, also the $1 million for New Bethlehem projects. So those combined are doing really quite well in terms of fundraising, but making it to that final number is really an important part of what this means in terms of delivering this. So that's sort of this update about the shelter. We expect, if everything continues in the path that it is, that we will be breaking ground for that work in early 2019. So, questions? We can say yay about that too.
I know, woohoo! Absolutely.